Board. Okay, just to give a heads up about what this is an empathy circle to explore what our experiences in the empathy circle. I'm just wanting to lay out explore the landscape and maybe do a series of these empathy cafes at some point. Oh, there she is. Do a series of these empathy cafes to just talking about what our experience is in the empathy circle. So we're already started, Shannon, so we're just jumping right into it. I'm just giving the explanation of what this is about. And so we're ready to start. The question is, this is our second call, and the question is, what is your experience in the empathy circle? And whoever would like to start. Oh, can somebody keep time? 5-minute turns? Does that work for anybody? So whoever would like to get started, select your listener. We're using the empathy circle process itself to explore this.
Can start.
Okay.
So I just wanted to apologize for the delay in my getting here.
Who are you speaking to?
Oh, I'll speak with Lou.
Okay.
I just wanted to apologize with the delay in my getting here. I had something run a little bit over unexpectedly. So I'm very pleased to be here. And in terms of my experience of the empathy circle, I think I can sense already that I spent some time immersed in empathy circles in the trainings. And as I've shifted my attention towards other things, I noticed like a qualitative shift in my outlook each week. So start with that, I guess.
Yeah, so you wanted us to understand why you were joining late and that you're happy to be here. And then you're saying about the empathy circle, how you experience it is, or one of your experiences from it is that you realize that when you were doing the training, you were very immersed in empathy circles, and that was happening a lot. And since you have stopped that and experienced life away from that, you've noticed a difference in your quality of life, that it has made a difference that you're spending less time in empathy circles and experiencing that less.
Yeah, and I'm trying to, in my mind, kind of I'm trying to put words to that difference. I think there's a way that I think I guess how do I want to say this? Productivity or, demands on one's time kind of creates an emotional system that's a little bit more closed and insulated. Yeah.
Yeah, so you, in an effort to put words to what that difference is, that difference of experience, you're saying that the time demands, when you have a lot to do and you're always moving from one thing to the next, that creates a closed system. You tend to be more closed off emotionally as a result of being more busy, having more stuff to do, and let's say not slowing down to do the empathy circle process.
Yes, and I'm playing around with that idea that like to be adaptive in these, certain realms, like it requires, or it feels like it does at least, requires shutting down in other ways in order to cordon off energy and kind of direct it in one specific direction. And that it doesn't feel quite as good, in terms of quality of life, I don't think.
So you'd like to think of yourself as adaptive and being able to, focus and be busy and work if you need that, and then also be open other times to slowing down and feeling more. And the second point you made was about that you enjoy you enjoy the slowing down and feeling that's like that feels good.
Yeah. And I think it's enrich. I think it actually, it kind of enriches my relationships. I think my relationships get more from that when I'm able to stay open more consistently. So I think that's my complete thought for now. Yeah.
Yeah, so it isn't just that it feels good, it's actually enriching, that you experience your relationships as more fulfilling and more enriching, and you really like that. And I think you think it's healthier too.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you, Lou. I feel very heard.
Okay. I'll go to Selene.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was fun listening to Shannon because I resonated a lot with the things that she's saying. Both the thing about having different modalities, like one where I'm busy and focused and trying to do stuff, get stuff done, um, and other times when I'm slowing down. Or maybe it's more like, oh, I recognize that I have a willingness to set my feelings aside, and when I'm trying to get something done, I might notice them. And then other times when I want to slow down and really let myself feel it and process, if I have stuff to process, to do that.
So it was fun listening to Shannon because you really resonate with what she was sharing about how in your life too, you have different modalities. Sometimes you're in get things done, and at that time you might put aside feelings that come up and exploring those. But at other times when you are slowed down and you are reflecting on what's going on, and you then enjoy processing whatever feelings you're having.
Yeah, thanks. And I also, so there is a balance between the difference between having a conversation, like just a regular conversation, and an empathy circle. If the four of us were talking, is it's more efficient without the reflection. We can get more said and hear more from each other if we're not reflecting each other. But the reflecting each other slows the process down and makes it a little bit more mindful and more deliberative. And there are advantages to both modalities of interacting.
So you're you're talking about a distinction and a balance between having intentional conversations the way we're doing now, using the empathy circle method, and more everyday efficient conversations where you're just communicating whatever is important in that moment.
Yeah, and one of the power of the empathy circle is that the structure of it slows people down and it interrupts our normal habits of communication that don't function very well, that block communication or create disconnects. And so the advantage of using it is it kind of helps people communicate better and helps people be mindful. And yeah.
So one of the things you like about the empathy circle process is that it's a different pace, and it allows people to be more mindful and to avoid some of the things that in maybe everyday conversation end up triggering or stimulating difficult dynamics that are not so mindful.
Yeah, and it teaches people the value of slowing down and the value of listening and the value of taking time to reflect someone back so that they know they feel heard. And yeah, so those are really valuable lessons for communication.
And you find the empathy circles actually teaches people how to slow down, in addition to the value of doing that and practicing mindfulness and care in both listening and responding.
Because I do notice myself when I'm a skillful communicator, just in regular life, not in the empathy circle, that I do regular conversation when that's working. And then I'm also noticing when it starts to break down, or maybe there's some misunderstanding happening, and I slow down and I start reflecting and I start doing the things we do in the empathy circle. So I don't think like empathy circles are needed all the time everywhere, but the skills that we learn in it and that we learn to practice, those can be applied in an adaptive way to make conversation go well if when you've got a lot of skill.
So you're appreciating the skills that are part of the empathy circle process, and saying that in regular conversations, when you're being, you notice things are starting to not go so well, you will slow down so you can really listen attentively in the way that you do in the empathy circles. So you take, it's a carryover of the skills into everyday normal interactions.
Yeah, thank you.
Wouldn't want to have.
I feel very heard. Thank you.
Oh, good, thank you. You wouldn't want to have abnormal interactions. So, Edwin, would you listen to me, please?
Listening.
So one of the things I've noticed recently in terms of skills or perspectives that I've integrated as a result of being in the empathy circle practice is that I can quite soon after I've been stimulated by something that somebody has said that I didn't like, I remember all I have to do is listen. I'll pause there.
Okay, so something you've noticed in yourself is that if you're stimulated by what someone has said, that through the empathy circle practice, you have sort of an awareness that you just have to pause to listen, that there's sort of a state that you kind of move into.
Yes, and it's more counteracting a natural reactivity that I have, that has gotten me into a lot of trouble through my many years, which is to show up with righteousness about whatever the topic is, and with a sense of it is righteousness, that I need to make sure this person understands my correct perspective. And so now I have a little wedge in there that can slow me down, and it's a relief to remember all I have to do is listen. This person can go ahead and be wrong for as long as they want. I'll pause there.
Okay, so you've noticed in yourself that when you're listening to someone, they say something that you can you react to it with sort of a sense of righteousness, and that you want your point to get heard. But now you realize that, you just have to listen, and you let them go on. So there's that space for listening that you have now. Instead of meeting them with sort of a righteousness, you're meeting them with a listening.
Yeah.
And you can let them go on for, so.
And what happens for me is it gives me a lot of space that I didn't have before, because I can, and I do, well, should I say something? They're so wrong, and I have this proof, and I can get more facts, and all of this stuff that I can go ahead and do if I want to. And unfortunately, a lot of the time I do want to, without actually engaging the fortunate speaker doesn't have to hear all of this stuff necessarily. So yeah, there's the slowing down, and then I would say add that gives space that I didn't have so much in difficult conversations. prior.
So the quality you notice in yourself is that you slow down, you have more space to listen and also to sort of work out, make sense of maybe what they're saying. You didn't quite say it that way, but I don't know if that's what you mean.
Well, I slow down enough to have choice about how I want to handle this relationship or situation.
So the slowing down, instead of just reacting to it, they're saying you have sort of a choice of how to react to it.
Yeah. And as I tell you this, I realize that what a huge value it is to learn that the first choice can be simply listen. And wow. So I now I want to get on my pulpit about that and bring it to schools and bring it to county commissioner meetings and so on. Just take a moment, just listen first. So
what I'm hearing is that through the empathy circle, you have an awareness that you can just listen first to what people are saying, and you're feeling inspired to sort of spread that message to within the society to different places.
thank you. I feel fully heard.
Okay, great. Shannon, can I speak to you? Yeah, what's sort of bubbling up is I heard Selene mention righteousness, and I think that the empathy circle helps with that righteousness. I just see so much righteousness out there. And sort of self-righteousness, I think on the political left, I know having been in that community, it just seems to sort of be core. It's like, we are right. We want the best for everyone. Why can't everybody see that? And there's sort of this righteousness, and I've just sort of it's just the sort of the destructiveness and of righteousness, just how toxic it really is.
So you really kind of resonated with this idea of righteousness that Selene had brought into the conversation, and especially self-righteousness and how that's been kind of embodied by the political left these days, and how destructive actually that it can be.
Yeah, and I think that's again with the empathy circle is instead of meeting someone with righteousness, like, I mean, just Selene just sort of nailed it. It's like, I'm going to meet you with my righteousness. That's like, I'm going to meet you with my listening. I'm going to meet you with my presence. And so that the empathy circle, it sort of meets everything with that sense, with that first listening.
It just seems like it really fits, that it really feels like a good way at describing the process. Instead of meeting someone with righteousness, the empathy circle is a way to titrate that such that it's meeting someone with presence.
Yeah, and I sort of appreciate that, because with dealing with people who are all righteous, it's very annoying, and then this is a way that they have to listen before they step into their righteousness. So I just find that very relieving for myself to be in those environments, to to be able to communicate with people that are coming from a very righteous mindset, which I find annoying.
So yeah, so that it's it puts you at ease to be in an environment where people that may be very righteous and thus annoying are tasked with actually listening first, and that feels better for you. And yeah, that's I think the gist of it.
So that's one quality. So I was just kind of building on what Selene mentioned. The other is the quality of the empathy circle, where I've noticed where we have done family empathy circles that go for several hours, and a shift. There's a palpable shift that happens in the room. Like right now, we're just getting started. We're sort of warming up here. But after a couple hours, a shift happens where everyone is sort of integrated the listening somehow. And there's a visceral shift where we don't even need to do the timekeeping anymore or the turn taking, because it just sort of happens, and the conversation just becomes, it embodies the turn, that turn taking and the deeper listening. So
interesting. So you're remarking that there's another quality that you wanted to speak to of the empathy circles, and you see it come out specifically with family therapy, the family empathy circles, and that it's that the whole format kind of gets integrated in such a way that people sort of go off muscle memory. They sort of don't even need the timer anymore.
Yeah, and the mindset too. It's like you just know everyone's listening to everyone, and there's a sense in the room that everybody's attuned to everyone else, and there's sort of space. And so there's that. And then there's also the sense, I find a sense of comfort, because I can get nervous in that space, like it's going to blow up, we're going to lose it. But then I know it gives me a sense of sort of groundedness to know that if things fall apart, there's sort of a safety net, that the empathy circle is a fallback safety net for if somebody gets triggered, gets upset, they're like, okay, let's go back to the empathy circle, and process to sort of keep things on keel, and then you can kind of let go of it, but there's always this safety net.
Yeah. You find solace in this sort of safety net of the empathy circle, especially when working with families and feeling that sense of nervousness about the reactivity perhaps of the family members, and knowing that you can kind of fall back on this format is nice.
Yeah, feel fully heard. Thanks, Shannon.
Yeah. Selene, I'll speak to Selene. So I am really resonating with a lot of what people are saying right now. I have found that even though I'm kind of going back to what I was saying earlier about not being involved in empathy circles formally, and the difference, and remembering kind of what I derived from it and what I continue to, is part of that is having conversations where I'm able to integrate some of the tools when I notice there's those not so pleasant or kind of desirable emotions coming up in myself, or even ways of being in the world where I start to feel that I'm in an impasse with someone else, or I start to feel like I'm having a really hard time understanding why another person's acting or behaving in the way they are, that the tools of the empathy circle, the active listening, can really kind of save you in those moments, I think.
So you're resonating with what's been said, and you are kind of going back to what you were talking about before, about how not being currently involved in a big way in the empathy circles, but still you notice the way the tools work in your life. Like, for example, in conversations where suddenly there's some kind of an impasse, and you notice in you some emotions that are maybe usual but not welcome, that you find that the active listening you've learned in the empathy circles works in that moment to bring you back.
Yeah, it's sort of those moments where you start to feel like, and it's hard to describe them specifically, because I think there's a lot of different emotions that can accompany those moments, but I guess something that always factors in is that, right? I think righteousness is such a good word, because it's sort of like this mindset of like, well, this is how I see it, and it's hard for me not to think that any other way of seeing this is just off. And anytime I get to that space, I know something's gone awry. Because if I've learned anything, you know, that thus far, it's like life is very complex, and like you can't, if you're thinking in that way, you're probably the one that's wrong. And so if when I get to that way of, oh, I'm pretty sure this is what's going on, and if you think differently, then you're wrong, then I know that I've ventured way off track. So yeah.
So you're looking at those moments where suddenly the conversation has changed to a place where you notice your own sense of righteousness, and that when that comes up, you know, you're off center, something's gone awry, and it kind of maybe clues you in to come back to listening or to checking yourself out.
Yes. And that's been so valuable because it's taking, I think it's the ultimate move in kind of taking, or, you know, it's one of the, it's a really good way to kind of take responsibility for yourself. Like you're not putting the blame on the other person for like maybe not communicating their full side of this, you know, the argument or how they're really feeling. You know, you're not blaming them for having a certain opinion based on their history, but you're just, okay, I need to go back into active listening because there's something here that I obviously don't understand if I think there's only one answer like that.
So you find that when you become aware that you are in this place of kind of righteousness, that it's the simply listening practice helps you remember to take responsibility for yourself, to not be blaming the other person, and to consider that there's something for you to learn here and understand that you haven't quite grasped yet.
Yeah. Thank you. I feel very heard right in time.
Lou, will you listen to me, please?
Yes, listening.
So what's coming up for me right now is about presence. And I have a quote from Marshall Rosenberg that I translated to use for and Spanish-speaking people, which is about that empathy starts out or is grounded in our capacity to be present. And I think there's a lot to that. I'll pause there.
Yeah, so what's coming up for you now in the conversation is just the importance of presence. And it reminded you of the Marshall Rosenberg quote that you translated for the Spanish circles that you're doing, actually, I can't remember the quote, but the point of it is that that presence, our ability to just be present, is really important and the beginning of listening well.
Yes, for empathy. And so I see it work in what we've been talking about. It works to bring me present to myself when I'm starting to deviate from, I don't know, some kind of mindfulness. And then there's also being present to the other person, which I have been thinking about how we pay attention to somebody else. And it's so basic and it seems so insignificant. And I think it is just the most powerful force. And it's so nothing. It seems like nothing, but that I am willing to be here with you and listen carefully and in that way express some kind of care has such a big impact.
Yeah, so you're recognizing that there are two kinds of presence. So being present to oneself and then being present to the other person. And that being present to yourself is important for grounding yourself and just recognizing what's going on in you. And then being present to the other person You're just really talking about what a really significant act that is. That it seems very simple and like it's a small thing, but just to be completely present to another person is huge, and that and it's an act of care, an act of love, and that it's beautiful and very significant.
Mhm. Thank you. Yeah, it's so basic in human interactions. And I think maybe as children, when we haven't, nobody has paid attention to us, or not when we wanted it, or not enough, that we're all of us longing for more. Attention to me, attend to me. Anywhere, I go to the store and the clerk doesn't pay attention to me. It's like, what happened?
Yeah, so it sounds like you're just saying or recognizing that that attention is a basic human need, and that pretty much all of us did not get as much attention as we needed when we were growing up, and that human beings need attention. That's like part of relationship, is paying attention to each other, and so you're very conscious of when that's not happening, that doesn't feel good, and you want to be seen. That's really important.
Yes, and then the expressions that we have in English, we say pay attention. I haven't looked it up, but I have a feeling that in it, the English of pay is similar, because in Spanish and French, it's like to lend. So lend me your ears, right? Lend me your attention, which is kind of like your spirit, your aliveness. Give me that. And just that is sometimes sufficient.
Yeah, so just the term pay attention, which in other languages translates into lend me your attention, really speaks to the human need for that, and the uh, yeah, and that's the gift that we're giving to each other. And I missed something in there, but
Thank you. I feel well heard.
okay. Are you sure? Because I know I dropped something there.
No, I'm fine. No, I think you
Okay.
got the.
Okay. All right. Great. Um, okay, so I'll go to Edwin.
Mhm.
God, there's so many things to talk about. So I totally agree that human beings are relational. We are social beings, and giving one another attention is a basic, human. There's a basic human desire there, and a nourishment that comes from it. And if you watch the way adults spontaneously pay attention to a baby, like a newborn baby, yeah, it really just speaks to, like, we know instinctively that that's what children need, is to have people look at them, pay attention to them, tend to them. I'll stop there.
Yeah, so you're sort of building out what Selene has been saying about the importance of attention, and how we're human beings are relational beings, and that the way that people pay attention to a baby kind of models this, just shows us how we just naturally know that attention is important, and give attention, for example, to a baby.
Yeah. Yeah, and then there are the studies that show that children, babies that don't get enough attention, like in a nursery, that they don't thrive. If a human being does not go and pay attention to them, they don't thrive.
So the studies that where babies don't receive attention, they just show that babies don't thrive if they don't have that. So I sort of just demonstrates, sort of proves the importance of attention.
Yeah. Yeah, so I also wanted to comment on what you were saying, Edwin, about when you do empathy circles with your family, there's a point at which the structure isn't needed anymore. And I would say, you know, that happens because enough trust has been built up that people are trusting that people care about what everyone is saying, and that there's a desire to listen and understood. And when that become when there's enough, because of the listening that has been happening within the structure, when that gets to a point where there's enough trust that's been created, then the structure isn't needed anymore. And like you're saying, that if that starts to break down, then you know you can go back to the structure. That's also a kind of safety that gets created, knowing that you can go back to that. So I really think trust and the safety that's built up from trust that's kind of what's crucial, and what the empathy circle helps create.
Yeah, so the empathy circle helps build trust, and that shift where you don't need it anymore is really when the trust reaches a certain point and people feel that they will be heard. So it's just sort of the centrality of trust.
Right. The trust that gets built up is I will be listened to,
Oh,
and I will be understood. And so, yeah, I think when people start to trust that, then they relax more into relating back and forth.
yeah. So it's that trust that I will be heard is what sort of happens. Is there's a feeling that I will be heard, and then I trust that I will be heard, and that's sort of the dynamics there that's happening.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, and then the other point I want to make was about social change, or about having influence on people. I do think, you know, teachers know this, that you can't really teach someone something if you don't have a connection with them, or if there isn't trust there. And that happens in any relationship too. Like maybe people know about this about their partners, you know, that you can't really teach your partner, you know, unless you have a good connection and trust between you and your partner. You can't really teach them something about themselves, or, you know, help them change. Yeah, I'll stop there.
Yeah, so a learning and growth can't happen without trust. You can't just try to teach someone. It's really a matter. There has to be a quality of trust there for someone to learn and to be able to teach them. And you can't, for example, your partner, you can't just teach them something. That has to come through trust.
Yeah, and I think, you know, I'm much more likely to be able to learn something from you if I trust that you care about me and you know me, and that if you're offering me something, you're offering it because you care about me and you want to support me. Learning is much more likely to happen, or change is much more likely to happen under those conditions.
So learning and change is more likely to happen if you feel that the person is willing to listen to you and hear you, and that you can trust them to hear you.
Yeah, and I know my time went off. I want to say one more thing, which is
Sure.
just that, you know, that I think the error in the model of social change that a lot of social activists have is, I just need to be correct. I don't need to have a connection. I just need to be right. And if
Yeah.
I'm right and I show you how wrong you are,
Oh.
that will create change.
So you're kind of bringing this into the larger social activism, where activists tend to think that, hey, I'm right about this. I just have to tell you how right I am, and that will create change. Whereas what really is there has to be that trust there for any sort of social change to happen, and activists tend to miss that.
Thanks. Boy, I feel really hurt.
Speak to Selene.
Yeah, sure.
Well, that felt good to when Lucy. I felt really heard. I kind of, when I'm in the circle, I really want people to feel heard. I always feel inadequate, like I'm not really hearing them to the depth of, that I could. So I do feel a little anxiety, and even though I've done this for a long time, I still feel I could do it better.
So you really enjoyed hearing Lou say, I felt really heard enthusiastically. It was satisfying your desire to really do it right and have that positive effect on somebody that is not always there.
Yeah, that I'm just listening. I can sometimes sense if I'm listening well, there's sort of a quality sort of a spacious quality, and I've sort of identified a felt experience that's sort of in the room. I've sort of named that, and I've done it with sort of this open quality. So it's almost like the feeling has only been named, and I'm not like grabbing a hold of it. I'm not controlling it. It's just out there in the space, and I'm just naming it without any sense of control or something like that.
There, you find sometimes in the speaking and listening a quality, a spaciousness. It's a feeling that you haven't totally identified or named, but you recognize it when it's there, as some kind of energy between people.
Yeah, it's sometimes this, and this helps with the speaker is sort of like letting their feelings out. So it is a relationship, right? I can listen better, I know, if the speaker is sharing a real feeling, that there's a quality of the feeling just kind of moves into the space without any sort of other feelings sort of constricting it or around it or tied in with it. And I can just feel that they're able to express it, and then I can just name it, and it feels like, it feels really good. Just so it's a relationship. A good, my good listening is if there's a good expression from the speaker too, a good empathic expression of felt experience.
So you notice that when the speaker is expressing their very sincere emotional state, and you sense that emotion in your interaction, that you find you listen better. So you're finding how the speaker and the listener affect each other.
Yeah.
By way of the felt sense of the emotions.
And then I can also sense that the speaker, when I do reflect back and hear them, it's sometimes like, oh, they're a little surprised. I've been really heard. It's like that, and they feel, I can feel their sense of satisfaction or sense of like the quality of them feeling heard. And it feels good to me too. So it's a bit like a mirrored, some kind of a reflection kind of dynamic kind of going on that, with there. Yeah.
So you sense sometimes that when the speaker has been so well heard, that they're a little surprised to be so well heard. And then between you, I'm almost thinking of a dance that is created by your accurate and heartfelt listening and the speaker's heartfelt and accurate sharing.
Yeah. It feels a little bit, not so much of a dance as a ping pong, like there's something ping ponging back and forth that is a little bit more of the metaphor that kind of comes to mind. Yeah.
So yeah, you mentioned that what works better for you as a metaphor is ping pong, going back and forth, and the synchronicity maybe, or the attention to where you're going to place the ball.
Yeah, it's that they're expressing a felt experience. I'm I'm sensing it. I'm naming it very clearly. They're getting sort of a reaction that, hey, this feels pretty good to be heard. I'm feeling their sense of, oh, this feels pretty good, which gives me a feeling of feeling good too. So there's this sort of, this emotional felt, these emotions are kind of going back and forth and sort of affecting each other and stimulating feelings in each other.
So you're speaking about when the speaker has expressed and you as listener have really gotten what they are saying, because the speaker is clear about their emotional state and you have really heard it, that there's a dynamic between you. You feel good, so good that the speaker feels so good.
Yeah.
And so between the two of you, you're creating an exchange.
Yeah, very much. Thank you. I feel heard.
Thank you. Well, let's see what I can do here. Shannon, will you please listen to me?
Happy to.
I think in a way that we're talking about the difference between a listening circle and an empathy circle, because one thing is to listen kind of, mechanically, and another is to be present in a more with more of me present. I'll pause there.
You're thinking that we're talking about a distinction between like a listening circle and like an empathy circle. And because there's a way to listen that's more mechanical. And then there's a way to listen that you're saying is more present with our whole being, kind of, I think.
Yeah, more this is what's coming up for me and not necessarily that what has been said.
Oh, okay.
And I think, I'm not sure about this, but I think that sometimes that it's useful to be able to distinguish and to choose how I want to be reflecting somebody, because there may be times when it's more helpful to have a little bit of emotional distance in my listening, and sometimes when it's okay to go ahead and full on guess kind of feelings and needs.
So you're saying that I'm trying to find the words, I think, when you first started, but that you're trying to kind of talk to this distinction, and that sometimes in listening to certain people saying certain things, it may be wise to listen in a more distant way, more mechanically perhaps, whereas in other times, maybe it's safe to go out on a limb and guess a little bit more as to what they're saying.
Yes, thank you. And both for myself and for the speaker. For example, if I were in a work situation, my boss, I could reflect without getting any emotional stuff involved. Or if it's a relationship where I don't feel completely safe, then I'm going to reflect back in a little bit more, I'm going to use the word distant way than otherwise.
Mm-hmm. So you're using the example of like, if you were talking to a boss at work, then you would be more distant. You'd be listening a more distant way. And similarly, with someone that you felt less safe around for some other reason, you might be listening in a more distant way.
Yes. And I want to be aware of where I am in the moment in order to choose. I want to be at choice and not be mechanical or reactive. And sometimes I think, especially in the big cafes, which I've told Edwin, I think of as wild compared to the cohorts, which are tamer. I think sometimes I haven't been as sensitive as I would like. Somebody comes from a really different culture and they've got this older white woman, and I don't really know what their reaction is going to be, but I want to learn more about that.
Mm-hmm. So you were sort of you were reminding me of a piece of what you said before, which is that you want the freedom to choose how to listen to each person you encounter. You're drawing upon your experience in the empathy circle cafes, where you're not really quite sure who you're going to encounter, and that, I don't know if I got this next part, but that sometimes you'd like to be more sensitive in those moments, that maybe you don't share the same background as someone, and there's certain times where you wish you had done it differently, or listened differently. And yeah.
Yeah, that's it. I feel fully
Yeah.
heard, Shannon. Thank
Okay.
you.
Okay, good. Thanks. Let's see. Edwin, would you be my listener?
Listening?
Oh, so I'm having fun listening. There's just great ideas, awesome ideas coming up. And I like that idea of there being different modes of active listening. So that's rolling around in my mind right now, even though I was wanting to talk about something else. I appreciated hearing that.
So you're enjoying having fun with the empathy circle, with what we're doing. And you had something else you wanted to talk about, but what's coming up is the levels of listening that was talked about.
Yeah, because I think thus far I'd been thinking about active listening as, as I think in my conversations with you, Edwin, as a way to achieve that presence of mind, that this is a mode, this is a means of achieving presence of mind. And so that the idea of there being different sorts or types of active listening that one could choose is kind of adding a different dimension onto that. Yeah.
So you initially had thought of listening as sort of one type of listening, that you sort of go to achieve something, and that this is you're seeing that there are sort of different levels of starting to think of the different levels of listening.
It adds a little bit. Yeah, it adds a different dimension to think of it in that way. I really appreciated what you were saying about, like, when somebody's being authentic, it's that you find yourself more readily picking up what they're saying. And something really strikes me about that. I really resonate with that. And I have to say that sometimes I found that empathic, even when if I'm saying something and it's maybe more intellectualized, it's not coming from my heart, and someone's not listening as well. Sometimes I do something in my mind where I go, yeah, I know you're right. I'm really not getting to the heart of the matter, and so there's something like useful about not actually being listened to in those moments, because maybe I'm doing something to not be as authentic as I could be in those moments too.
Oh, so you're looking at authenticity in terms of the speaker, or when you're speaking, that if you're saying something that's sort of intellectual, and then someone's really struggling with getting it, that's sort of a sign to you that maybe you're not speaking as authentically as you would like to, and then you sort of just notice that. And
yeah, exactly. And so I think that takes some trust, because if somebody doesn't trust someone else, they might get upset or mad, like, why aren't you listening to me? This always happens in my life, or, whatever we go to that makes not being heard a very difficult experience. But if you trust someone, you can kind of see, well, they've listened in the past, and I can kind of actually see why they're losing track right now. Because, yeah. So
it's, if people haven't listened, could you say that again? Just to kind of.
Well, I'm just saying, I think it requires trust to be able to, yeah.
So it requires trust to speak authentically.
Or to just be able to know, like, if someone doesn't hear you, to be able to do that self-reflection that, well, I'm not really speaking from my emotional experience right now. I'm actually thinking in a more intellectualized way. So I can see why that person's not picking up on what I'm saying.
So there's a level of trust that if the person's not understanding you, and that you're noticing that you're sort of intellectualizing, there's a sense, there's a level of trust in yourself to even notice that and identify that and have that awareness.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. I think I feel heard for the time being. Yeah.
Then I'll speak to, I'm not sure who I've spoken to, I guess Lou.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm really enjoying the kind of the deeper exploration of the nuances of the empathy circle and of listening in general. So it's very, yeah, it's very interesting.
Yeah, so you're enjoying the discussion that we're having and how we're exploring the various aspects of the empathy circle and how it works, and then also about listening, exploring that and the depths, the different depths of it.
Yeah, and you had mentioned trust, and Shannon just brought up trust. So that whole quality of trust, I think, is very central. And for me, when I go into the empathy circle, I don't try to necessarily push. Like sometimes people say, "Oh, people aren't speaking authentically or real or whatever. They should be speaking more emotionally and stuff like that." My sense is more speak from wherever you are, and through the listening, trust will emerge over time. So I don't want to push anybody they have to be, speaking from this whole thing, speak from your heart. I always irritates me in all these workshops, right? Speak from your heart. It's like, I always say, speak from any part of your body you want, speak from your ass if you want, whatever. It's up to you. It's your choice.
Yeah, so you're reflecting on what people have been saying about trust, and that you agree that trust is a key part of what of people speaking honestly and hearing each other, and that you think the structure of the empathy circle and that process helps create trust by people listening to each other, and that you really feel it's important to accept people speaking however they speak,
Right.
at whatever level of honesty or emotional expression that they are, and that the phrase "speak from your heart" annoys you because you think that kind of is an instruction to like include emotions or speak in a particular way, and you like saying "speak from whatever body part"
And I
you'd like
mentioned
to. Yes, as a way of indicating that it's fine wherever people are. Speak from wherever you are.
Yeah, and if somebody say, there's sort of this notion, oh, you're speaking from your head, and there's sort of a put down to it. And for me, it's like, if you want to speak from your head, if you want to speak from your heart, speak from any part of your body that you feel comfortable with. So yeah, I try to make that point so you don't have that pressure to, oh, you got to speak you have to speak. I think that pressure just creates more stress and tension. And if you say, well, I can speak from wherever I am and be heard from wherever I am, then the trust will build over time.
Yeah, so you're kind of naming the implied criticism or judgment of people who are speaking more intellectually about ideas, as opposed to including a lot of emotions or other things, and that you really think it's critical to listen to people and accept and reflect back whatever they are saying, and speaking from whatever part of themselves they want. You think that's actually a critical part of creating safety and kind of embodying a culture of empathy.
Yeah, so again, the structure holds that, right? It's like you will be heard from the part of your body that you're speaking, from. And so there's and then somebody else can say, hey, I don't like that, and that's fine. They're speaking from their part of the body of maybe not liking how the person is speaking when it's their turn. So, and then they're met with empathy there too. So everybody gets to speak from whatever part of their body they wish. Yeah.
Yeah, so the structure of the circle and the rules kind of ensure that everyone can speak from wherever they are and they get heard for that. and that that's what creates trust.
Yeah.
Having that happen, not people speaking in any particular way, or yeah.
And it's that trust eventually is a trust, and then the openness happens through that trust, that openness, transparency, uh, just happens as the trust gets built. So in a sense, if people are mistrustful, they have good reasons to be, right? So it's because of the society in general. So
Yeah, and so one of the things that happens as the circle proceeds and people get heard and trust is built, then people make their individual choices about shifting what they are sharing. And you pointed out that when a circle starts, if people don't know each other, they don't have necessarily reason to trust each other, and they have reason to be cautious because who knows what's going to happen. And so, yeah. So
yeah,
it's just more validating that people speaking from wherever they are from is fine.
yeah, feel very heard, Lou. Thanks.
Great. So I'll speak to, I'm not sure, Shannon, I guess I'll speak. Yeah, so I totally agree with what Edwin just said. I think that's such an important element and an important lesson. And it relates a lot to what Selene was saying about being sensitive to how do I reflect, or what sort of level of depth are my reflections. Yeah, so I'm just feeling very uh, excited, actually, that was just articulated so well, because I think it's really true and important.
So you're just reflecting on Edwin's share and Celine's and saying that you totally agree, and it has something to do with the depth of people's reflections.
Yes, and what Edwin was saying is about the freedom to talk however you talk and being heard and accepted for that, and how that builds trust.
And the freedom to just talk however you want to talk, and how that builds trust to be able to do that, I
And be
guess.
heard for it, yeah.
And be heard for it, yeah.
Yes. And I guess there are two little things I want to add to that. So one is just about the depth of reflection, and it's kind of a principle that I use, that the reflection should be close to where the speaker is in terms of the kinds of expression that they are doing, and that if your reflection is too far away from where they are, then the person will experience it as analysis, being analyzed. So if they're not expressing much emotion, and you come with a lot of emotion in your reflection, and you are guessing a lot of their feelings, then they're more likely to feel that you're analyzing them as opposed to reflecting back what they are saying.
Mm. So I think hopefully I got this, but you're emphasizing the importance of being of the listener being experienced near to what the speaker's saying, and not coming in with a lot of emotion or with a lot of guessing, because otherwise that can come off as more analytic than listening.
Right. Yeah, some more I want to say about that. Yeah, and actually, so it also has to do with whether the person is expressing, let's say, feelings in a nonverbal way. Um, if I experience that they are experiencing feelings, but just not naming them, then I'm more likely to include them in the reflection, because I'm actually sensing them, as opposed to they're actually not expressing very much feeling, but um, I'm guessing at how they would feel, and then I'm more like projecting. Like if I was in that same space, this is how I would feel, so I'm including it because maybe that's how they feel. And that's a subtle distinction, but I think it makes a difference.
Mm-hmm. So the active listening has to do with whether or not the speaker is experiencing a lot of emotions themselves, because if they're not experiencing a lot and not putting words to them, because if they're not experiencing a lot of emotions and the listener reflects that back, then it's kind of a projection, or I think I might have lost that last part, but it just gets away from what's actually being said.
Yeah, and hearing you reflect that back, I'm realizing the other thing I'm monitoring is the level of trust that I'm feeling with the person. I think if I feel like there is trust there, then I'm more likely to include something that they're not expressing explicitly. But if I don't know them very well and it's new, then I'm more cautious about that, because I think it requires a level, like you were saying, it requires a level of trust to have someone reflect something that is more intimate.
Mm-hmm. I think you're zeroing in on this importance of trusting both the listener and the speaker, because if you trust someone, you're more likely to go out on a limb and guess what they might be saying, and you might otherwise not be willing or able to do that with someone that you don't trust.
And actually, and also that if the speaker trusts the listener, then they're more likely to hear the reflection as seeing them as opposed to analyzing them.
Mm-hmm. Right. So if the speaker trusts the listener, they're more likely to feel seen by the active listener rather than judged.
Yeah. Or analyzed by them. Yeah. Great.
Analyzed.
Thank you. Thank you. I feel heard.
So I'll speak to Selene. Just sort of reflecting on the experience of not feeling heard and what that brings up, how powerful that is. And kind of wondering why in the moment, why is that so powerful? It brings up very early, I think, stuff, which I think is why there's such an emphasis in therapy on the frame, and in the empathy circle, maybe on the format, the structure is very important.
So you're thinking about the experience of not feeling heard and how powerful that is, and that you sense it's from probably based in childhood experiences. And so you think that that's why in therapy and in empathy circles, there's the frame, the structure, I guess, to hold those moments, those feelings. I'm not sure about that. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that it's really disorienting. It's really kind of can bring up things and states of mind that are so different from what maybe your MO is, or the way that you normally navigate. Can bring up a lot of confusion about why, what happened that occurred. And yeah, the same thing that we were getting to before about kind of it's an uncertainty though, but it's like this narrowing of perspective, and it's like this kind of insistent focus on how and why did this happen.
So you're speaking of this experience of feeling not heard as disorienting, and that it brings up confusion and questioning of what have I done that I am not being heard, or what have I not done that I am not being heard, and that is very troubling in that moment.
Exactly. Yeah. And I'm wondering about the safety net of the empathy circle. Is it sufficient to hold some of these pre-verbal emotions? I'm sure that come up, not feeling heard. I mean, as Lou was saying, that's like an infant need. So the types of things that can get triggered in this space could be from 2 and below. They could be 0 to 2, unhealed traumas, repeated. And so is this enough? I mean, it's a lot. I mean, people, the extent to which people can get triggered by this is immense. So I guess I want to kind of just leave that out there as a challenge. Yeah.
So you're looking at the question of can the empathy circles process, and as it is there a safety net for situations in which people are really stimulated by this sense of not being heard because it's a pre-verbal experience. There's something that has happened, that unhealed traumas. And you're wondering and questioning, is there enough care, well, you said safety net, installed to deal with those kinds of situations?
Yes, especially in instances where someone's reaching out in a certain way and then is misunderstood or not heard. And how does that get healed or worked through? How does that, can that fit? Does that fit? Doesn't it depend on the person's willingness to grapple with it in the moment? I can't imagine everyone would be willing to do that.
So you're thinking about somebody who's in that situation, they're not feeling heard, and do they have the capacity to reach out and when they're not heard or misunderstood, to clarify it? And that's not everybody can do that.
Absolutely, yes. I feel very heard. Thank you, Selene.
Thank you, Shannon. Lou, would you listen to me? I can't
Yes.
remember who's. So this question that Shannon has posed is interesting to me. I'm remembering the circles we did thanks to Michelle on trauma-informed facilitation. And for me, it was very eye-opening. I had not considered the experience of people in the circle, and especially the wild circles. I have no idea what they're bringing and what I might stumble upon.
Yeah, so the question that Shannon raised about the potential for people to be triggered in the circle and can they cope with that, that reminds you of the circles that Michelle held on the cafe that Michelle held on trauma-informed facilitation, and that it helped you realize that you don't know what people are bringing to when they come to a circle. And
yeah, and sometimes I have experienced myself as, for example, not liking somebody who I also think might benefit from special care, and being concerned that I would be able to be a good facilitator for their circle because of it. And fortunately, I don't think I've caused any harm, but I sure watch myself sometimes.
yeah, so when you think about your own experience, you wonder about your ability to be empathic and to hear someone, let's say, who's someone who triggers you in a way that you're really not liking them, or you're afraid of them, and so yeah, you wonder about that. About you don't think that you've harmed anyone, but you worry about it a little.
Yes. So I do kind of take extra care. And I think with anybody, the closer we get, the easier it is to relate and to find something that's worthwhile or engaging or a way to connect. But sometimes it takes getting closer than I really would want to.
Yeah, so you're saying that you're aware that the level of connection that people feel in the circle affects the kinds of things they share, and that you and that sometimes you're not sure that you want to have that level of connection for people to share things that are more intimate. Is that right? I'm not sure that I got that right.
No, it's more, it's all going on inside of me. How am I going to serve this person who has just landed from another planet that I don't know? And so I have moments of concern. And then when I actually engage with them, listening, or having them listen to me, that dissipates. So while my instinct is to pull away, the closer I get, the smoother and more enjoyable it is.
Oh, so you were describing the turmoil that goes inside of you when somebody comes with something that's very different or charged in a way that's hard for you. But you recognize that if you just participate in the practice and you listen to them and they listen to you, that kind of dissipates, and things usually do wind up feeling a connection with them.
Yeah, thank you. And I think that the key there is one of the values, which is curiosity. So when all my judgments are going or whatever, curiosity is a really big one for me. And then I want to find out, who is this person this stimulating these feelings for me? And then it's just another person.
Yeah, so something that really helps you in the moments when someone is bringing something that's triggering for you and scary, something that helps you is to remember, be curious, and that curiosity makes you want to understand what's going on in them and maybe understand yourself too. And that's a useful, that works for you.
Yes. Thank you, Lou. I feel fully heard.
Okay, thanks. So I'll go to Edwin.
Listening.
Okay. Yeah, I think this question of people getting triggered and the potential for that and what kind of care to show for them. I have a lot of confidence that just listening to people and hearing them is very healing. And that I do think, though, that if I am facilitating a circle and I see somebody not being heard, I'm going to step in as a facilitator and help them be heard. And the choice I make about when to do that has to do with how much discomfort do they look like they are feeling.
So I think I'm hearing that you're building on what Shannon said about people coming in with trauma, having difficulties, and sort of the safety net, but you feel that the circle does have a lot of the listening itself is sort of the quality that can sort of hold that, and you do make it a point as a facilitator, if you notice that someone is not feeling heard, that you'll step in to make sure that they feel heard, and you're sort of evaluating the level of them maybe not feeling heard.
Yeah, because the trauma that she's describing, which is someone has something important and they're trying to get it across and it's not understood at all, and they get very triggered by that, so they're upset by it. That I would notice, and I would step in to make sure they feel heard so that they are not traumatized, because I do think that is a risk, and a facilitator that just kind of lets that happen and doesn't do anything about it, I think that is a problem.
Mm-hmm. So the trauma is someone maybe has trauma they're trying to express something, they're not feeling heard, and that's sort of adding to the trauma. And that you try to be aware of the person that's not being heard and try to hear them, because it's the hearing of the trauma that's the sort of the healing aspect. I'm kind of putting stuff in there, but
Right. Yeah, and then I think the other thing, because this question is something that comes up in the empathy circle training periodically. The other thing I recommend to people is that if somebody was upset in the circle and didn't seem to get resolved, you can offer some listening to them outside. And the other is to have information about mental health services in the area, so that you can, for people that really need a lot of support, you don't have to become their counselor. You can point them to services that so they can get the help that they need.
so you're addressing what happens if the trauma comes up in the circle is one is that you can offer to listen to them outside, but then you don't want to become their sort of counselor or therapist, but you could also have references of where they could go to get the help that they might need.
Okay. Yeah. Anything else I want to say about that? I think there is a dilemma, a little bit of a dilemma, where someone gets very triggered and is feeling hurt but doesn't show it, is good at hiding it, because that's how they survived. So they learn to hide it really well, and they don't say anything about it, but then they're really traumatized. But I don't know that there's anything you can do about that. What can you do about something that you don't know about or you don't understand? I think maybe if you suspect something might have happened, you could check in with the person. I guess maybe that's something to do.
Yeah, so if there is sort of trauma, someone's not feeling heard, you would step in and listen, or you'd give them resources, but then they may be hiding it too, what it is that their trauma, and there's not much you can really do about that.
Except maybe if you think they might have been traumatized, but they're not showing it, like something happens, you think, oh, that probably would have been difficult to hear. You could check in with them outside afterwards and to ask them about it. Maybe they'd be willing to say something then.
So maybe they're hiding it, and you sort of have a sense that they're hiding it, and you could like check in with them afterwards to kind of address it, just to check if they did feel traumatized or.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks. I feel heard.
Okay, I'll speak to Selene. Yeah, it's sort of this topic of trauma. I guess I'm gonna kind of step into that. So let me see, I had made some notes here. I guess I guess I was looking for examples, like what are some examples of trauma in the empathy circles, and the circle not able to hold it. Yeah.
So you're stepping into the topic of trauma, and you've been thinking about maybe are there examples of in the empathy circles of somebody with trauma where that has come up and hasn't been resolved or addressed?
Yeah, I'm thinking of, and I think Lou mentioned about, children, babies needing that attention. And what I've read is the Romanian orphanages were sort of a case study in that, where they had sort of a policy as, oh, we just have sterile septic orphanages, the babies don't get touched, they just, and it just caused huge amount of trauma in the dysfunction, the whole personality changes in the babies, in terms of withdrawing and everything that happens. So there's kind of that deep effect that, I guess that's trauma, right? They're not seen, held, touched, and there's this deep embedded trauma that they have.
So you're thinking about the Romanian orphanages that had a policy of being sterile and just maybe feeding, but not holding or paying attention or caring for the infants, the orphanage, the orphans, and with a result of tremendous amount of trauma. And
Yeah. Sort of heartbreaking, just even imagining it. It's like, oh my God, this just feels horrible. Yeah, I feel like it's really sad just even thinking about it.
just thinking about it for you is like horrible and sad. And
Mhm.
this has happened.
So what if people come into the empathy circle? Yeah, I know it. I get a little of this within the healthcare community. Is like, oh, it's like there's something. I guess a little irritating. It's that like listening is important, but if you start listening to people, that it'll open up the doors to all their trauma. So let's not listen to them. So I mean, there's some, I've heard it in, it's come out of the healthcare. It's like, oh, this can be really dangerous, so let's not do it. So, yeah.
So you're thinking of a narrative that you associate with as coming from the healthcare community that says, if somebody is traumatized and it's okay to listen a little bit, but you don't want to open the whole can of worms and you don't know what's going to come out or what you're going to.
No, it's that it's not good to even start because this can of worms will open up. Yeah.
So don't even start with empathic listening because it could be dangerous.
Yeah. And there's, I know the Roots of Empathy, Mary Gordon, who runs that program, where they have little kids sitting around a green blanket with the mother and child there, and the children talk about the experience. And she held at it, and held that in schools. And one of the principals said, what have you done with this? We had 3 cases of children sort of revealing child abuse had come up, because here's this space where they can talk about what's really going on. And they're talking about child abuse, be it, physical or sexual abuse. And then it's like the principal told her, like, this program has opened this up. And then she's saying, well, shouldn't you want to hear about that? So it's like, if you just kept it all under wraps, if we didn't do anything, all that stuff wouldn't come out. So I guess I'm kind of addressing that there is a Pandora's box of emotions, and that this empathy circle can open up that Pandora's box. Yeah.
So you're thinking of Mary Gordon, who has a program, Roots of Empathy, and who had in a classroom, she'd have a rug where people would come, children and parents or whatever, talk about things. And in the course of that, some children revealed abuse they were experiencing. And the principal was very upset and thinking that she had, created a problem by facilitating this speaking of abuse. And that you think that, yes, it can happen that people's will open up and experience painful emotions and want to talk about them, maybe.
Yeah, there's a lot more. It's a big topic, but I feel heard since it's my time.
Thank you. I cannot remember who I've been speaking to. Do you? So I am going to speak to Shannon, please. I don't know if I spoke to you last.
Sure.
So I am enjoying noticing some of the values from the empathy circles as tools for handling some of these issues that we're talking about.
Mm-hmm. So you're liking thinking the conversation we've been having around, or you're noticing that the values of the empathy circle can be used as tools for addressing certain moments, I think.
Yes, and one of them is respect. And respect can be so many different things for everybody. What it is for me is related to giving somebody equal attention with, coming with a kind of blank slate with no prior conceptions of anything.
One of the values you're zeroing in on is respect. And that for you means giving everyone, attention and active listening. And I think I might have missed the last part that you said.
So yeah, with bringing no preconceptions and it's related to attention to me. It's like, I am going to really pay attention to you out of respect for your humanity, our humanity. And the closer I get to somebody, the more likely with a lot of people I am to feel some kind of sympathy or care, even if initially I might have been put off by who knows what.
So you're specifying like the importance of listening without bias or judgment, and that the closer you get to people, the more able you are to be able to do that. You often find you're able to do that.
Yes, and to feel some kind of connection. So whereas initially they might have felt alien to me, it's like, who is this? And I don't understand who they are and what their life is like or anything. But then I get close and I find out, and it's like, wow, this is interesting, and I'm engaged.
Yeah, so at first you might feel a little wary, like you don't really know where is this person coming from, but the more that you listen, oftentimes you do get engaged.
And I think that from that engagement, a lot of time, I don't, probably not always, but I am able to provide the kind of listening and attention that will be suitable, so that I will not go in too deep if it's somebody who wants a little more distance, and also that I can be really open to somebody who has a lot to disclose.
Through that engagement, you're able to be sensitive to the person's actual needs in front of you, that you're able to kind of intuitively know if they need a little more space versus if you can kind of engage more or move in closer.
And there have been moments, thank you, when I have felt in the person's response that I wasn't successful, and that they've gone to being polite. Oh yeah, I feel fully heard, and it's like, then, and especially in the cafes where I'm not likely to have more contact with them. And I feel badly in that moment. I hope they have the resources to take care of whatever pain they are experiencing. And those are difficult moments. It hasn't happened a lot, but and of course I don't know then, right? They've closed off, so I don't really know. And then I have to deal with my own mind and my vivid imagination.
So you're saying that there's been moments where people have sort of withdrawn, and you're kind of left not knowing if, what happened to them. And, maybe if they were triggered, you don't really know the extent of it. And so you might kind of have some concerns about that, especially in the cafes when you potentially won't see them again.
Yeah, thank you. Really heard, Shannon. Thank you.
Lou, would you listen?
Yeah, listening.
It just sort of feels like a mess. Really. I think there's so much we can't know, whether it's good to open up, and as long as you open up, that's great, or whether or not we should really be cautious and respectful if it is indeed dangerous to do that. How do we really know? I mean, is it black and white? Is that something we should just dismiss either way? Seems really really an important thing to discuss. I can see why it's discussed so much in the mental health field.
Yeah, so you're saying this area of trauma and people being traumatized and the question of how to respond to it and how to be sensitive to it, and it's very messy, and that there aren't any clear answers, and so you're happy to be discussing it, but you can also see how it's something that's discussed a lot in the medical community because it's not easy to know what to do.
Yeah, but it should be. And I think that I struggled in my training with this, and I see other people struggle with this a lot, that there's a tendency to either withdraw from messiness and just say, well, to hell with it, we're doing it that way, or we're going to do it that way. Or there's a tendency to become confrontational and expressive, and that's, you know, not helpful either. And so, you know, and so I think it's a difficult question, and I think we'd be well served to grapple with the difficulty rather than erring on either side.
Yeah, so you've seen, so it's messy and difficult to figure out what to do, but you think it's important and that we should keep talking about it, and that you've seen, and not just like decide one thing or the other, and you've seen people say, well, no, we shouldn't get involved in it, we should just step away, and the other way that we should move towards it, and that we should actually be kind of confrontational to have people deal with it, and you don't think either of those extremes is probably good. Yeah, and that we need to keep talking about it.
And yeah, I think I think unfortunately, you know, being in the mess is maybe the closest thing to a resolution that I can find, is being willing to accept my own, and to the extent that that I can, and being able to accept other people's, or at least just let them be if that's where they're at. And I say unfortunately because, you know, well, who wants to feel bad? You know, so
Yeah, so I think you're saying that it's unfortunate that it's not easy to know and that there isn't more clarity, but you think it's important to kind of stay in the mess and kind of do the best you can and work towards trying to deal with the uncertainty of not knowing exactly what to do, or not knowing if what you've done is the right thing. Is that right?
I think so. Yeah. I mean, it's basically exactly what I said. I only bristled at you're saying to stay in the mess, because I don't think, I mean, there's certainly a wallowing that could happen that I don't think is helpful for anyone. But I'm speaking to the bias that I notice across the board in people, which totally makes sense, of wanting to withdraw from pain more often than go into it and be with it. Yeah.
Yeah, so you bristled a little at my saying staying in the mess because you don't think that wallowing in it and feeling stuck is a good thing. But I think what you did mean was staying engaged. In other words, not turning away from it, but staying engaged with it is what you think is the right thing to do.
Mhm. Yes. Yeah, that's right. And I especially think, unfortunately, that this could be a risk factor if someone does come into a cafe with considerable trauma around not feeling heard. I think nobody wants to touch that, you know, and it's unconscious. It's like this unconscious going away from the fire, like, oh shit, like, wow, that's what happened with that person. That was an ugly response to seemingly benign conversation, you know, and yet that's totally re-traumatizing. So how do we deal with that? Yeah.
Yeah, so you think it is a risk that of doing cafes, that somebody comes in and is carrying a lot of trauma and doesn't get heard and feels traumatized by it, and and then not maybe not getting dealt with in an effective way, that's a risk, and that it's something we need to think about and keep talking about. Is that
Well,
right?
that it's a likelihood to have that sort of ostracization or isolation be repeated and reenacted in a group setting like that, that the more traumatized someone is, the more that they put themselves on the outside and become the flaming, pile, that everyone's afraid to get close to. If that makes
Yeah,
sense.
so what's likely to happen is a repeated pattern of the person acting out or behaving in a certain way that's triggering for other people, and people distancing themselves and wanting to turn away from that person.
Exactly.
That cycle's likely to happen. Yeah.
Yeah, I feel heard.
Okay.
Thanks.
Okay, so we're coming up to the time. We have 12 minutes. So I thought Mary could just use this time to kind of debrief. I just, asked that we do 2 of these, this sort of a test to see how it worked. And maybe you could just hear from everyone how this has worked for you. And maybe I'll even start. Yeah, I love it. This is great. I'm really enjoying this. It's sort of like the landscape of the empathy circle, exploring it from all the landscape from all different points of view. And yeah, I've really enjoyed it and gotten a lot of insight out of it. So I'm just thinking maybe of doing more of these in the future. So, but yeah, I don't know, Lou, you want to just share how it was
Yeah,
for
I mean,
you?
I've enjoyed these 2. I'd be willing to do another one. I don't know how many I'd be willing to do, but as long as as long as I'm enjoying it, I would, and I'd say I'd be willing to do another one. I think this topic that we were ending on, I think I would like to explore it more. Uh, yeah, I think that's what I want to say about it. I'm enjoying it.
Okay, Selene, do you want to?
Um, yeah, I thought it was, this is a lot of fun. And I like this kind of exploration. I, I, I like the topic of the experience of empathy circles, and the closer I kept to that, the more enjoyable for me it was, I think, because um, it's rich. There's a lot to examine and share about it. And I like going deeper with topics, and this allowed that for me. So yeah, I think it's great. Thank you.
Okay, Shannon, do you want to jump in?
Yeah, I thought it was great. Rich, very rich for me, gave me good things to think about. And I feel that maybe this is just me, but I think we were in the middle of a discussion rather than to a conclusion. So I'd be willing to kind of pick it back up another time as well.
Okay, well, I'm open for doing it again. There's a couple of let's see, next week is Lou's your session, and the 5th actually would work. I don't know if would that work to continue in 2 weeks, just for one more.
I have a possible conflict on the 5th, but I don't know yet whether there's something I may have to attend, but I'm not sure. We could. When will I know whether I need to do that or not? I'm not sure about that either.
So tentatively, or within a week or so, or
Probably, yeah. So we could set it. We could set it for the 5th tentatively, and then I could let you know. And if it's a problem, you could go forward without me. You could invite someone else, or we could pick another. Go to another Friday.
anyone else, or Shannon or Selene, does that work? Or
Yeah, I think I can do it on November 5th.
It looks clear for me, I think.
okay, great. Well, so we'll have it tentatively.
Okay.
Just one more time. I don't want to make it a regular thing, you know, with a commitment, just one more. The whole thing of trauma, I definitely wanted to go into that more, because that was a great topic to how to address that. And, you know, so I would love to explore that more. I've got some notes here. So anything else? Any other thoughts?
I wanted to make a comment about
Mhm.
the opening the can of worms. So, you know, healthcare workers who wind up dealing with people who are carrying a lot of emotional difficulty, usually, and family members also, uh, and them protecting themselves from um, becoming the patient's therapist or the family member's therapist by not engaging on emotional things. And I think that there's a healthy boundary setting there. Um, you know, because they have a healthcare worker has a certain kind of role with the person. And while it does, any healthcare worker, it does help their process or the service that they're providing by connecting with the person to some degree. Um, you know, they also have the problem that if they start to open the door to processing the person's emotional life with them, they're kind of shifting their role.
Mhm.
So, you know, there is a healthy boundary to set there. And I just wanted to give that reflection, or that I had that. I felt kind of strongly about that. Um, yeah.
Well, sort of building on that, something that came to mind is doing the empathy tent in Berkeley, where I just offered listening, and this woman came and sat down, and she was talking about suicide. And then I mentioned, well, there's all these services. Oh, everybody gives me those services. I hate it when they give me all that junk, you know. And it was like, okay, I'm just going to listen to you. If you're going to kill yourself, you're going to kill yourself. You know, it was sort of, that was sort of, there was nothing, you know, much I could do. And I just kind of hoped that the listening was constructive, you know, helpful. Because that was just a one-to-one, you know, listening, not a circle. But
Well,
yeah.
so I can tell you that the sidewalk talk people, you know, I did sidewalk talk training, and
Mm-hmm.
what they do is they actually train their listeners in um, suicide. You know, the questions, the 4 questions you're supposed to ask if you think someone is thinking about suicide. Like, do you have a plan? And I forget what the 4 questions are. And
Mm-hmm.
then, and that if it does seem like they actually have an active plan, then you're not supposed to let them go. Like, you're supposed to call the number on the card and try to get them help. And so they took that step of saying that, so if
Interesting.
we're going to
Uh-huh.
do this, we're not just going to hand the services, we're actually going to try to figure out if someone is in trouble.
I'm thinking of situations where the healthcare worker is um, interested in, are you taking your meds? Uh, what are you doing to feed yourself? Those kinds of things. But then the patient, the client, comes with all their emotional stuff, and so and so called me, or so and so didn't call me, and then it triggered all of this other stuff. And then the issue of food and meds and showering doesn't get dealt with.
Yeah, and if a healthcare worker is a skillful listener, then you give them 5 or 10 minutes of listening, and then you return to the activity that you're supposed to do with them. My wife's a speech pathologist, so I'm intimately aware of how that dynamic, how that works.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Mhm.
But what I heard in the training via Michelle's is that people with trauma are hesitant to speak. I don't know why they end up in the empathy circle, but they end up for example, that they will be very reticent, fearful Well, that makes sense.
Well, it's a push-pull. They want to be heard, so they come, but they're afraid they're not going to be heard. They're afraid of being traumatized, that they're going to say, something that's important to them, and they won't be heard for it. They'll be rejected or not accepted. And so, yeah, so it's a approach avoidance is
Mhm,
happening at the same time.
mhm. Yeah, yeah, thank you.
Well, certainly a lot more in the whole trauma topic, even what is really meant by trauma. I'm not really sure if it is like people having not been heard or or
Oh, I wrote it down yesterday. Who said this? Somebody well known, that what trauma is a condition that prevents you from being able to be in the present moment.
Yeah. Robert Stollerow does a whole paper on that trauma is like a portal, like from Harry Potter, where when trauma happens, time gets distorted and somebody's almost kind of transported back to that time when the trauma happened. Thinkers like him believe that we all have varying degrees of trauma, every one of us. So I guess that's how I was using the term too. Not like these are the people with PTSD, it's like, we all have pockets that if they're stumbled upon or popped, bubbles, that we.
Uh-huh.
I've heard trauma described as anything that overwhelms your nervous system.
Yeah.
And I think that's a pretty accurate description. And right when it gets triggered, you get the overwhelm of the nervous system again, and then you can't stay present. Yeah. And listening really helps, listening just with what's happening. I also think, and I think this is actually really important. I also think that one of the important parts of accepting people wherever they are, like speak from wherever, is because then people open up to the degree that they feel safe to do that. And that's one of the things that protects people from being re-traumatized. We all develop protective mechanisms, ways of protecting ourselves from the ways that we've been traumatized. So someone might be super intellectual because, that's their way of protecting themselves, their feelings. And so the fact that they're starting out super intellectual and that's what that's good. They should not be asked to do more because that's what they're ready to do. And as they feel safe and trusting, they may open up more because they feel ready to do that. So one of the ways to protect people from being traumatized is to accept them wherever they're ready, at whatever level they're ready to participate.
this didn't come up, but also I find that that you have a choice of 3 listeners or more, that you sort of can choose who you feel will be the best listener too. Like sometimes I say, oh, this is really something I want to share. I think I'll choose Lou to listen because I know he's going to listen really well,
Yeah,
for
and
example, or etc.
That's a very intuitive process. It's like a non-intellectual felt almost body, like your body knows who to trust. Right, that's true.
And maybe facilitators can be encouraged to trust that the participants in the circle are doing the best that they can for themselves in that moment. And I don't have to worry for them because I can't, because I don't know any more than that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think that's good. Yeah.
Well, okay. Well, I want to keep us on time. Everybody
Okay.
probably has other appointments and stuff, so we went for 2 hours. So thanks. That was really delightful, and hope it works out on the 5th. Otherwise, see you at this time slot in the support group, Lou.
Thanks, Shannon. Thanks, Selene.
Thank you all.
Thanks,
Thank
Shannon.
you.
Bye.
Take
Bye,
care.
Selene.
Thanks.